Like maybe right now, a specific type of avodat Hashem is not so essential to me, but you know what? It might become really important to me at another point in time. So it's not just like this woman versus that woman. It's we are many women. We go through so many phases in our lives, and I think it's important to have those opportunities to tap into, as we change.
Today's episode is sponsored by Toveedo and Zelda hair. Toveedo is an online subscription platform that creates Jewish content for children of all ages, and I love the work that they do. I'm grateful that they exist because there's nowhere else where you can get a wide selection of Jewish content for your children in a safe environment that also educates them in the Jewish values that you hold so dear. So thank you, Toveedo. We have a code for you, Human and Holy HH10. Thank you for supporting our work. Our second sponsor today, Zelda Hair, is a wig company that really seeks to assist women in connecting to hair covering. So not just getting to cover their hair with beautiful and affordable wigs, but also getting to experience hair covering in this full, integrated, excited way. And Zelda has a podcast where she explores hair covering for Jewish women, speaks to different women about their experiences with hair covering, goes deeper on the topic. And thank you, Zelda, for making today's episode happen. Hi there, I'm Tanya, and you are listening to Human and Holy. Today's episode is a conversation with the brilliant and beautiful person, Laurie Novick, and we talk about all things women's roles. So women becoming more engaged within their Judaism, whether or not we should be afraid when women are entering into spaces that are completely halachically allowed, but maybe women haven't been in previously, how to navigate our own desires within our Judaism, what it means to be deeply engaged as a Jewish woman, how she defines a Jewish woman's role, what it means to be a Jewish woman, a woman's role within Shul, and all the good juicy topics around Jewish womanhood. We also talk about halacha, Jewish law, and speak about the depth and significance of halacha in our practice of authentic Judaism. Laurie speaks about how we often think about halacha as black and white, but it really has so much space within it, and there are so many sources that point to different perspectives and different ways of coming to a conclusion within halacha. And she runs a site called Derech, where she actually creates these resources for women to have access to the sources around mitzvos that are particularly connected to the life of a woman, like hair covering, fertility, and more. This is such a special episode. Laurie is such a treat to get to speak to, and the fact that we got to do this in person was chef's kiss. Thank you, Hashem. She is not only brilliant, but also just a really beautiful spirit, and I learned so much from my time with her, not just from hearing her scholarly perspectives, but also just from getting to witness her character and her relationship with her Judaism and her way of connecting and relating to all things halacha, Torah, God. This woman is magnificent, and I'm so excited to share her with you. I'm so excited to have you here. The fact that we get to do this in person feels really like the hand of Hashem. What are the odds that you're going to be in LA? So thank you so much for being here. Let's get started with you introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, my name is Laurie Novick. I live in Efrat with my husband, I would say I live in Efrat with my husband and my 5 children, Blia and Hara, but not all of them are at home anymore. So this year we have 2 who are basically at home, which is kind of crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a big shift, so I'm getting used to that. Professionally, I'm a yartzeit halacha, which means that I help women with questions of Torah mishpacha. I've been doing that for 21 years.
Wow.
Which is a long time. Thank God. I've learned a lot over that time. And in addition, I work as yartzeit halacha for Nishmat on their website, yartzeit.org. And then I have a website under the auspices of Yeshivat Har Etzion that I founded and I'm the main writer for, called Derech, Women and Mitzvot, which is about women and mitzvot.
Yeah.
So, so I think about these issues all the time. And I teach a little bit. So that's basically what I do professionally. Just trying to think, is there anything else to know about me? No, I'm not so interesting.
That's really interesting.
Love to walk, love to meet people. Share Torah.
Oh, okay. Everything that you do is fascinating to me. I've been binging your website, Women in Mitzvot. I love what you do. I saw it before I knew about you specifically, just saw your name as an author, but not knowing you as a person. Something that I'm so appreciative about you is that you're not only a scholar, but you're also such a refined person. And it's such a gift to see that, someone who is so sincere in their work and truly loves what they're doing. You're not just knowledgeable, but you actually have a real love of the Torah and for women women and for the work that you're doing. How did you get into women and mitzvot? Like, what was the drive there?
All right. Well, first, I just want to make clear, of course, I'm not the only one who's responsible for the website. So I have to give a lot of credit to my team. And the women I work with and the Rabbanim that I work with are extraordinary. So I don't know if I'm so refined, but with the help of my team, we try to get there. How did I get into this and get interested in this? I almost feel like, how could I not, right? I guess the thing that comes first to my mind is just a very deep internal understanding of myself as being female and Jewish. Like, those are, like, if you talk about, like, what are parts of your identity that you can't begin to like make sense of what you'd be without them.
Yeah.
Those are super, super core elements of my identity and what I think about, what I care about, how I come at everything in the world. And once that's there, and I'm like, I'm a thinking person, I'm a caring person. So the question about how those things work together, how they can work together for me, how do I see them working together for other people? What does that mean? So that all fascinates me. And then I love learning Torah. So my natural avenue for exploring that, part of it is talking to people and looking around and learning things. But a big part of that is learning and trying to see, well, where do the things that concern me show up in Torah, and how do they show up in Torah? And sometimes that's obvious, and sometimes it's not so obvious. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like this natural progression for you of your own curiosities, also like your own personal identity, and then you've channeled that into the work that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. Like, let's make it official. Like, not just do it casually in my life, but I'm actually going to do this full time and make this my life.
Yeah, I guess the truth is, so really, I taught this for over a decade at Nishmat.
Oh, okay.
A class in women and halacha.
Okay.
And at first, I was scared to teach it, and then I didn't want to teach it. I had all kinds of feelings over the course of time. And then what happened that kind of triggered really making it kind of more full-time in my life was I'd have former students come back, and sometimes they'd say to me, we're not always seeing in the world some of the things that we talked about in your class. Like, some of the nuance or some of the exciting, just things that we were excited about spiritually. We're not always seeing that in the communities that we're coming home to. And we don't necessarily always feel like we have someone to talk to. Now, I know that there are amazing communities out there. There are amazing Rebbitzins out there, Rabbaniyot out there, rabbis out there, there's teachers. And yet, not everyone has access. You can be in an amazing community and for whatever reason not really be deep inside it. There can be teachers around and for whatever reason you don't click, you don't connect, you don't find your way to them. And I felt like it shouldn't be hit or miss. Like, every Jewish woman should be able to get information and ideas and grow spiritually from a korot that talk about these things. Like, it shouldn't just sort of depend on if you're lucky enough to have that amazing teacher in your community and have a connection with her. Like, everyone should have access. And then the other thing, and this was really hard for me, was feeling like our communities sometimes treat anything related to women and mitzvot like it's inherently explosive. And that's really hard because I definitely understand that a lot of these issues are sensitive and we want to be careful about Torah. And Yirat Shamayim, 100%. I'm totally on board with that. And at the same time, sometimes it gets to the point where, like, you can't get basic information. Like, I'm not talking about people who are looking to start a revolution. I'm talking about people who just want, like facts. Like, real facts about where they stand in the world of Torah and mitzvot, and can't necessarily get to them because it's seen as like almost dangerous to explore sometimes.
Interesting.
Or sometimes I'll see it not from a community perspective, but from a woman's perspective. Like, I've had a lot of women that I've met over the years who, like, when they hear that I'm involved in this, will say something along the lines with, well, I'm not really interested in those issues. Or no, that's not even the phrase that I'll get. It's not so much I'm not interested. I'm not troubled by those issues, or I'm not upset by those issues, where the assumption is to learn more about women's halachic obligations inherently must mean that you're unhappy. Like that there couldn't be there would be no other reason to explore it than being dissatisfied. Which, so on the one hand, of course, I respect everyone where they're at, and different people have different paths to Torah, and not everybody needs to learn the same things or the same ways, and yet the idea that you would only want to know this aspect of Torah if you were upset about it is very sad to me.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you brought that up, because I want to explore more about Derech and what each article does and how you lay out those sources without coming to a conclusion, and how you offer halachic sources about women's topics from women's perspectives. And you mentioned that like most people think that in order to explore these topics, you have to have a chip on your shoulder or something concerning you within the community. And one of the major topics that I want to be exploring with you today is women's role within Judaism. And that is something that also I think people handle with kid gloves, and has that perspective of like, we're only going to go there if we're discontent in our Judaism, or we don't feel good about being a woman, versus we're going to go there because this is such a beautiful big topic to explore, and not necessarily because we're unhappy or dissatisfied, even though that could come into the picture too, and that's also very valid. Like, it can come with pain, and it can also just come with curiosity. It can come with an excited exploration, and all of those reasons are good to explore something, but it's not necessarily coming from a negative place to just like explore women's connection to their Judaism. You're right that like it can feel like an explosive topic at times, and it often is for people.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the sensitivity of fear, because when you're talking about halacha, and the concern is, well, why would you need to learn the halachic details if it wouldn't be the chip off your shoulder? But I guess the truth of the matter is, I don't really think of the worlds of Torah as being completely separate. Meaning, I know that, like, I don't know, in SEM or in high school, like you might have like, oh, now it's halacha shir, and now we're learning about chumash, and now we're learning about machshava, and like different. And I've never really identified with seeing those boundaries as so rigid, meaning, of course, like you have deep respect for people who specialize in an area, and of course, like you're going, but like, I don't know, can you really learn Chumash on a deep level without getting into serious questions of Jewish thought? Like, can you really get into Jewish thought on a deep level without opening up other areas of Torah? Yeah. So I feel like not having halacha as part of that discussion is funny, but in the case of women's roles in Judaism, it actually speaks to something very deep, something that I find fascinating, which is that because Jewish women have not historically learned halacha formally, right? Jewish women, for much of Jewish history, Jewish women, and we still do this, you look at what your mom does, what your grandma does, what people in your community do. Right. You want to know how to keep a kosher kitchen. I'm not saying you never open a sefer now, certainly, but really the primary way you know what you need to do is you see what your mom did. When you have the privilege to have that resource at home. You see what happens when you go to your teacher's house. Like that's how you learn, through example, and not necessarily through books. This is something that one of my teachers, Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik, discussed in detail as a general shift in the Jewish community, but I think it's much more profound when we're talking about Jewish women. So there is this other element as well, which is, well, if we start to open up the sources, are we somehow moving away from that lived and breathed experience of Yiddishkeit?
Interesting. That
women have tapped into and that's been so central to women's identity. Like, are we threatening the way we're going to look at our moms? If we start opening Sfarim.
Interesting.
Yeah, though at the same time, and this is also really tricky, like my joke, we did, one of the series we did for Derech is about clothing, and my joke, it wasn't really a joke, it's actually more like a lament, writing it with the team, was that I wish we could just say, like, dress like your mom. Duh. Like, okay, no one wants to really dress like your mom, but, like, you know, on some level, like, some of this discussion, like, I wish we could just say, like, okay, forget about inches, forget about, like, collarbone, knee, whatever your standards are that you've learned. I'm not saying they're not important. I don't mean it that way, but I mean in terms of, like, what's central to your category. Why not say, my mother dresses this way. My mother is, you know, okay, it's not always possible, but and the many, many cases where it is. My mother's an authentic, frum woman. She dresses this way. Or the women in my community are authentic, frum women. They dress this way. Like, full stop, done. Right? And yet, the truth of the matter, so that's where it's tricky, because the truth of the matter is that's not the message that we give women in their communities. It's like, on the one hand, it's like, oh, well, how are we introducing sources into this discussion? Is this going to somehow, like, shift our attitude of reverence for tradition or the way that women learn through example? And then on the other hand, in our communities, in our schools, a lot of time what's happening is it's not, oh, so go back to your family or your shul. It's a lot of times it's do this, don't do that, without the sources. And so I almost think sometimes that might be the worst of all worlds, or it's missing something. Not the worst of all worlds. It can be beautiful too,
right?
But, like, sometimes it's missing something.
So you're saying that the ideal would be for Jewish women to, or maybe traditionally, the way that Jewish women learned about their roles or learned about their halachic obligations were through their mothers and grandmothers, and there was this natural, you know, passing down of what it meant to be a Jewish woman and what a Jewish woman's role was within Judaism, and so she didn't have the need to open up a book. And now that we are shifting into opening up the book, maybe there's a concern that we're, like, losing that connection to, like, our matriarchs and what they have to offer in terms of life wisdom and lived experience of Judaism.
Yeah, exactly. So I think about this all the time because, like, when I think about Yiddishkeit and what I love about it, you know, it's really growing up in a family that loves Yiddishkeit, right? Like, really, like, and also a love of Torah.
Right.
You know, I think a lot about my grandmother and just, like, let's say I live for Lila Seder, right? And I know that so much of that is about the fact that she lived for Lila Seder, and the joy was just infectious. You know, it wasn't like there's some houses where Pesach is very heavy, and I'm not saying it's always fun in my house preparing for Pesach.
You're human.
But like, it's animated for me. Like, it's always like, well, I'm doing this, but I'm going to get to Lila Seder. Like, I'm getting ready to leave Egypt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's so exciting.
Right.
And that is so important, that, you know, making food, like creating this sense of lived, rich Judaism, that you're in it, that it's not just something you're visiting, but it's your world. I love that. And I love that aspect of being a Jewish woman. I'm deeply attached to it. I wouldn't want to lose it. It's central to my life. And at the same time, I feel like, and I don't think it's just me, I feel like the way we live and the things that we encounter, that there's the intellectual training that we have, you know, our ancestors were not women with bachelor's degrees, not to mention master's degrees, or PhDs, or whatever amazing professional training or knowledge or intellectual pursuits that women have now. Like, that's much more recent, and there's got to be an expression for that. I think also, we want to bring our whole selves into Judaism. So that's part of it. And then part of it is also that, like, we're not living in the same community where our families lived for hundreds of years. And sometimes there are different challenges. And makorot, like sources, learning textually can be a tremendous resource for understanding how to apply that tradition to our reality. So what I'm thirsty for is not saying I want this and not that, not choosing. What I'm thirsty for is the integration. I'm thirsty for women who say, I am interested in not in challenging my Yiddishkeit, but in deepening the way that I practice Torah, mitzvot in my life, and bringing in not just the intellectual side, but honestly, a more informed side, of, you know, a side where if there's a discussion, I can understand it better.
Right.
If there's a question, I have more resources for formulating it.
Yeah. which is the gift that sources and the text gives us. I'm curious to know, if you had to define a woman's role within Judaism, how would you define it?
So this is one of these funny things. It's like, for me, it's so open, meaning definitely that element of making a rich, lived Jewish environment is very big for me. Mm-hmm. But how that plays a part, or what, let's say, I don't know, what percentage of that is the key thing for a given woman, I feel much more open about that, in the sense of, I don't think it's being a mother, being a wife, which so many of us want to do and not everyone is zocha to do. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always work out the way people plan. In Israel right now, we've got a lot of new widows, which is just heartrending. The idea that that's a central part of a woman's role, absolutely, right? Mm-hmm. That's part of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us. I embrace that. I embrace the idea of a Jewish woman as Akeret Bayit, as being in the heart of the home, and at the same time, like, how that's balanced with the rest of her, how much of her time or how much of her Jewishness is connected to davening or for chesed, or for learning, or for teaching, or for sometimes leading. All of those aspects, I feel like there's room for women to have different mixes. Something funny, I was just thinking about this in these terms. So when Yitzchak brings Rivka Imenu home, so Awala Sarah Imo, right? He brings her home to the tent, and then it says Sarah Imo, his mother Sarah, and it's a little like the text of the Chumash isn't totally clear there. And so Rashi says, and she becomes like Sarah Imo. She becomes like Sarah Imenu in the sense of, and these are the classic descriptions of the light being lit and the blessing in the challah. What I think is so interesting there is that, if you think about the stories in Chumash about Sarah Imenu and about Rivka Imenu, they're so different. Right. They are not the same person.
Not at all.
I mean, they're both really strong women.
Yeah.
Really impressive women. I mean, I'm awestruck by both of them. Right. But they're really not the same person.
Yeah.
So there might have been, somehow Rivka in that tent, this is my take, not Rashi.
Yeah.
Somehow Rivka in that tent is becoming like Sarah. There's this element of continuity that's like Sarah Imenu. She's got the ner, she's got the candle lit. There's a blessing in the tent. There's a cloud. There's God's presence. The Shekhinah is in the tent. She's got that. And at the same time, she is her own thing. Right? When she has, she's holechet, she seeks out HaKadosh Baruch Hu's advice, directly. When she's having trouble with her pregnancy, meaning she has her own ideas and convictions, and so did Sarah Imenu, but in a different way. And that's I think what I really, so that's why I answer that question of all the traditional stuff that we usually think of as a Jewish women's role. I think is a Jewish women's role. I don't want to lose it.
Okay.
I don't want to give up on it. And then, but I think of it as yes and.
Yes and.
Yes and.
So I'd love to carry that yes and into the lived experience of a woman, because something that I've definitely seen and grappled with myself is this utopian vision of what a Jewish woman's role is, especially in today's day and age when women do have more access, which is and so she's homemaker, she's domestic housewife, she's mother of many children, and she's also studying, teaching, leading, whatever it is that she personally feels drawn to. And many women find themselves in impossible situations where they actually can't carry all of this, and they feel that being a Jewish woman is to be crushed under the weight of so many responsibilities or expectations, or even just dreams and possibilities of what it means to be a Jewish woman. So sometimes it can be such a large vision of what a Jewish woman can be that ultimately ends up being a crushing experience for a woman.
Wow, crushing is a really hard word.
Yeah, I know. I went
it.
hard. I went dramatic. But it can also just be overwhelming or a lot. Like the domestic, like even just speaking about being a homemaker. Like we often speak about that as like, oh, a woman can outsource. She can, but really like there's a lot of mental load that comes into having one child, two children, three children, right? So it can be a lot for a woman to hold and carry. So do you see that? And what would be your response to someone in that experience?
You're right. And that's a challenge. And it's there's a way in which you could say it's almost unfair and impossible. And there's also a way in which I think it's kind of like an exciting challenge. I think what the difference is, I'm thinking about it as I'm talking, working, because it's a really good question. I think the thing is that if we move away from expectations of perfection, or expectations of this is what it means to be a great mother. This is what meaning there's, because again, like I see so many different amazing models for great mothers, and some of them are, let's say, at home with their kids all day, and some of them are going out to work and coming back, and you can be with your kids and not with your kids. We know that, and you can be like there's so many different ways to do it. I think if we can find a way to let ourselves define that for ourselves a little bit more, if that makes sense. In other words, that there's a goal, but it's sort of like within that hat, there's the question of how I personally am going to wear that hat, and it's not just one thing. And then if we can find it, if within the challenge, there can also be an excitement or even inspiration at, I'm finding my way into these roles. Like, not I have it all figured out and I've got it all right, and my motherhood's always going to be perfect, and my tefillah is always going to be perfect, and my Shabbos table's always going to be perfect. Like, I'm done with perfect. I'm never perfect. I can tell you that for sure. And I know some people who seem perfect, and then you talk to them and you discover that, like, there's a lot going on for a lot of people. And you're right, we can't, I feel like I'm babbling, but we can't be everything to everybody. But I feel like if we give ourselves the space to say, I want to feel my way to my combination of these roles, to my best way of inhabiting these roles. And sometimes I might fall short of my own expectations, and that's okay. And there's another thing here, I'm not on my own. Right? God willing, whether it's a husband, community, parents, family, like to have a sense of being in things together. Honestly, also Torah. I guess it's also part of it for me. Like so often I'll hear women being like guilty that they don't learn enough. And I feel like it's such a resource. Like there's so much strength that you can get from Torah. Like, and if we got rid of that sense of, well, if I'm not learning a certain amount of time or a certain like if I'm in my quantifiable like data set, like I'm a learning failure, and instead if it was just like get that nourishment when you can and enjoy what you get out of it, that's different. So
I love that.
That was really long-winded. I hope it...
That was not long-winded at all. I love what you just said. I think that like open-ended relationship with learning, where very often when we want to start studying more, we want to like set certain amounts of time or certain amounts of material that we're going to cover, and that can feel like another thing to put on our to-do list or another load, versus having that perspective where it's just like, I'm going to seek out this nourishment when I can, how I can, and just absorb whatever I can get in this like excited and curious way. It's a very different relationship to have with Torah study, especially as a woman.
Yeah, and also just in general, I guess what really connects to is this idea that you have values. So what's really important is to know what your values are. And there's like the overarching values that we all would like to share. You're a Shamayim, Avat Torah, Avat Hashem, Avat Abriot, loving God, fearing God, all that. We all want to share that, for sure. Everyone's signing on the dotted line. But then like in terms of your own life, so back to like these questions, how can I be the mother and the this and the that? Like, okay, what do I think are the most important values for me as a mother? And how do I pursue that, right? I can't do all of it all of the time, but what are the things that like, I know that this is the core essential thing to me. And maybe that I can work on.
Yeah. That's huge, is being able to distill it into like smaller pieces or personal values. When you describe the heart, a woman being the heart of the home, how do you define the heart of the home? What do you mean by the heart of the home?
So that's a good question, especially because it's really important not to like elbow out men, right?
In the home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think like part of being the heart of the home, especially now, is for those of us who have merited to have marriages, families. It's really important to acknowledge that men are also changing and thinking about things and more involved now. I think a lot of them with children and with things around the home, and that's great and blessed. And I don't think that's a threat. I think it's a fundamental sense of, I don't know if this word is going to sound funny in this context, but almost sort of like, I guess the word I think of is making. Like, we use this, it's a funny term, we use it like before, like I'm making Shabbos.
Yeah.
I'm making Pesach, right?
Right.
And like a lot of times what it sounds like it means is like I'm making the food, right? Or I'm working out the logistics. But I feel like that word making is actually a really good word. And it's that understanding that you bear responsibility for making it real. You bear responsibility, like it's not going to be Shabbos if there isn't some conscious awareness that like we're making it Shabbos. And that, by the way, there's a halachic expression of that also. Like that's one of the ways to understand Kiddush.
Right.
Like Hashem made Shabbos holy. Why are we making Kiddush? So one idea is we're just recognizing, not just, it's a good thing, we're recognizing God and the holiness of Shabbos and the way that of the creation of the world, and that's part of what we're doing when we're saying Kiddush. But then this other aspect of Kiddush is we're adding Kedusha by recognizing it. Like there's this element that we put in, and that's like when I think of like making. So like I'm making, so some women, and this happens, like there are women who will buy like all takeout for Shabbos, and there are women who will invest hours and hours in cooking, and there are families like everything's done hours before Hadlakat Nerot. I would love to be that family. Sometimes I am in the summer, not so much right now in the winter while we're taping. Or I know some women who spend a lot of time thinking about like conversations for the Shabbos table. Like there's so many different directions to go in, or even just on Shabbos to be able to like say, this is a moment where I'm taking my mind out of so many of the day-to-day things and really like, but some fundamental way to take the lead in saying, we're making Shabbos. We're making, this moment, Hanukkah. What makes Hanukkah? Hanukkah, it's Yamim Halal of the Hodah. Days, right? We're talking in Hanukkah now. I don't know when it's going to come out. But days of praise and thanks. How do I make it Hanukkah? And obviously setting up the candles is part of it. And having latkes can be great, whether you're making them or buying them or whatever it is. And it's nice if you can have a game. And kids like gelt, sure. But that fundamental move of saying, like, my role here is also to make it, and not just, I have to start with me. I have to make it Hanukkah for me, but I also have to see what it means to make it Hanukkah for everyone. And it doesn't necessarily involve it doesn't have to be time-consuming or projects or super planned or photogenic, right? It's an emotional, spiritual motion that radiates outward and brings the family with it. I think that's what I mean.
Ooh, I also love how you led with, what does Hanukkah mean to me? And that like experience of actually being able to pinpoint what Hanukkah means to you is where you're going to begin to radiate outwards to your family to create an environment of Hanukkah in your home that will mean something so different for other people. That's something that I love about how you're answering every question, is this like openness and expansiveness and the space for different types of women to live within your answer. Like it doesn't mean making a game, and it doesn't mean making donuts, and but it could mean that.
Right.
And it doesn't mean giving over to our Torah, and it could mean that. Like it could be so many different avenues where you personally feel this is Hanukkah.
And I just really believe in that. There was one time, so I've taught for many years, and there was one time I was teaching. I had a class that wasn't going so well. It was a class on Jewish thought, Machshava. And one of the Rabbanim that I was working with said, look, just the next class, it was around Hanukkah time, so I guess that's why it's coming to mind. He said, the next class, forget about everything else you're doing in the class, give a shiur about something that's really meaningful for you in Hanukkah. Like, not what you think you need to cover as the teacher who's teaching this topic related to Hanukkah.
Nice.
Give a shiur about what's really meaningful for you for Hanukkah. And it was so good. Yeah. It was because, and I think oftentimes, and this isn't just a Jewish women thing, it's a Jewish everyone thing. Truth is men are part of that also, of course they are. Yeah. We're all part of it. It's just taking responsibility for our part. But taking that moment to say, like, where am I actually now? Am I here? Yeah. And what could bring me to be here? Or why do I want to be here? What is it about? What is touching me? Like, all of those questions, and I don't think we give them enough space. Yeah. It's so easy to just not go there, or honestly, because it's been such a hard year this year in Israel where I live, to like, where are Hanukkah miracles? And there are so many miracles, but there's so many more miracles that we want, that we're davening for. And, how do you face that? But I do really think that it has to start with something real for you. And the real for you doesn't have to be fancy or impressive, or this is a pitfall I hear about a lot. It doesn't have to be the way I felt when I thought I was in my spiritual height. Like, it's not that either. It's just, it's like that nitzot, that spark, what's the little thing that pulls you here and can get you there to just a little bit be in it and make it.
We recently did an episode that was like very responded to about like women's roles within Judaism, etc. And one of the things that came up was that often when women seek to have like a deeper connection to holidays or whatever it is, the response that they feel that they get is kind of like, stay in your lane. Like, like you should, I'm like, I don't want to be negative, but I want to like portray this perspective and this experience that people have. Stay in your lane, or like, are you trying to be like a man? Or that is not like a woman's participation in a holiday. So you can like create that environment for your family, but like don't push the envelope or like mess with what your mother did or what other women in your community are doing. Like, why do you feel an extra pull to be involved and engaged?
Right. I think that it's so sometimes it can be really beautiful. Like, I've seen, like, there are women who really put their heart and souls into like just setting a gorgeous holiday table, and it's just beautiful, and it's love, and it's you feel the light, and you feel that they're there, and no one should take away from that when that's meaningful to someone.
100%
at all. I think though that I have such deep respect and affection for true avodas Hashem, or for serving God, or really just tzama nafshi, for that sense of sometimes your soul longs for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and you don't know exactly what you're longing for, or maybe it's taking a shape that's unexpected or a little different in your community. And you have to be careful. Of course, we have to be careful about tradition and about halacha, absolutely. And at the same time, if on Sukkah, and this is, so many women do this already, but not all do. And I understand that, but like, if a woman's soul longs for sitting more in the sukkah, for being more in the sukkah, I talk about like physically being there. It's hard for me to understand not being supportive of that, or not seeing that as beautiful, because I think it's beautiful. I think that when we say for Ashkenazi women, the psak halacha is generally that we can recite brachot over mitzvot that we perform voluntarily. So like, let's say shaking a lulav, women are exempt from the mitzvah of shaking a lulav. And at the same time, a woman can shake a lulav. Mm-hmm. That's true for all Jewish women. Some Sephardi women, and generally speaking for Ashkenazi women, before shaking a lulav, recite the bracha.
Yeah.
And when you recite the bracha, the question came up in the poskim, so how can a woman recite the bracha? The bracha is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, right? That's the usual. Asher kiddushan mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Asher kiddushan mitzvotav v'tzivanu, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us. How can you say God commanded us when you're exempt from this mitzvah? Mm-hmm. And the halachic discussion of that, there's a medieval commentator, the Ran, the way he phrases it, is he says, well, women can say that because we're part of Klal Yisrael, we're part of the Jewish people who were commanded to do this. It's not like, no, my heart does not long on Sukkot for like shaking the maple tree branch. No. Like it's longing for the lulav and etrog, maybe, not for everyone, but maybe it's longing for the lulav and etrog. And it's doing that because I'm part of Klal Yisrael, and this is a mitzvah that's meaningful in Klal Yisrael. So when there's a halachic reason not to, which sometimes happens, so that's one thing. But when there isn't a halachic reason not to, we even understand there as being a mitzvah in that, meaning it's a different type of mitzvah. It's not the same level as Hashem commanding, but in the sense of it has a halachic value. It's considered to bring rewards, schar mishamayim, if a woman shakes lulav. So the idea of like saying like stay in your lane to someone who wants to do that, I think for me personally, it's hard because we think of mitzvot as beautiful. We think of avodat Hashem as beautiful, and we believe in being dan l'chaf zchut and like judging people favorably. So my personal feeling is to judge favorably if a woman is really interested in caring about a mitzvah, and there's not some strong countervailing halachic reason not to do it. I think there should be a lot of space for pursuing that, and that can be enriching. And I can say in my own life, like, or even think about it, because women, we do sit in sukkahs now. Like it used to be, if you look at like, there are even some like photographs sometimes or accounts, like there were a lot of communities where not everyone had a sukkah, or the sukkah was very small, it was very cold. Like there's a lot of reasons that would be contributing factors. But basically like the women would serve the food to the men sitting in the sukkah and eat indoors. And again, that can be beautiful. That can be beautiful. You're facilitating someone's mitzvah observance, you're taking part in it, you care about it, and you're keeping mitzvot in your own way. A woman's not obligated to sit in the sukkah. She's still eating her meals that she is obligated to eat on sukkah. Great. Like, fine. But so many of us right now, it's natural for so many of us to eat in the sukkahs with our family. And I can't speak for you, but I love that. Yeah. And the idea, like, it's a similar thing. Why do I love it? I don't just love it because it's like, because it's pretty outside. I love it because it's a mitzvah. Yeah. And that's meaningful. And it's part of my avodat Hashem on Sukkot. Yeah. It's thinking, Ki v'Sukkot hoshavti et b'nei Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us into these Sukkot. It's a stunning thing to be a part of, and I'm so grateful for it. So it's something that I think we can not just like tolerate, but I think it's something that we can appreciate and make room for, and we don't have to make people feel bad if they have different feelings one way or another. But like, you know, and where it is mikubal in our communities, like we take so seriously hearing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. That's like such a strong minhag. And then also women are exempt. But it's just over time, like women, it's from the same impulse. We said we need to hear shofar.
We want to be connected.
We want to be connected. It's the shofar is our tefillah. It's the cries of a mother to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like, how can we not listen to it? It's a communication with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like, why? So, and yet there's room to miss it if you need to miss it, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it is something that I think it's beautiful. I also think that this is a really big place where learning from sources can make such a difference. Because if the response is not immediately like, I don't know, suspicion or worry, but if the response could be from a framework of, well, okay, it's the first step. Why don't you learn more about it?
Right.
Like, how can we not get behind that?
Yeah.
Like, let's learn more about it and trust. And again, you want to learn in the right frameworks. You need to learn from people who are trustworthy. You need to learn from Sfarim who are trustworthy. Like, okay, it's also true that sometimes people learn things, they get things wrong, or it's the wrong context or the wrong type of teacher. That's important to be sensitive to. But like, if you learn something well and you understand a mitzvah better, that's so positive. And women are obligated to learn about the halachot that apply to us.
Right.
And actually, part of that is understanding the halachot that don't necessarily apply to us and why, so that we can find our place in Torah and mitzvot. So I'm very strongly in that camp. And I guess part of that is also because it's like learning has been so meaningful to me. It gives so many different layers to what it means to be keeping a mitzvah, like your kavanah, your intention when you're doing things, I think can be so deeply enriched by learning, especially, the halachic learning also. And it's hard for me not to feel supportive and excited about that.
Yeah. I love that you said that it actually has like halachic significance for a woman to do a mitzvah, which I'm 100% agree with you on. And I think, remember when I was a teenager, people would talk about like giving teenagers space to express themselves because they needed to be expressed. It was like a need that they had. And it always like struck me as condescending as a teen, because I was like, no, we actually have something to share, that like it's actually the expression itself. It's not just like the act of expression, but it's what we have to say. And I think the same when it comes to women, which is like, that is something that has come through into our inbox at Human and Holy, which is there space to change the cultural norm to help women feel good in their Judaism and to help them like feel expressed, etc. And I wonder about the missing piece, which is like, are women also Jews that have halachic value to every mitzvah that they do? And they're not just like woman first, Jew second, but like Jew first. And a Jewish woman sitting in the Sukkah has halachic significance and connects her to God. And same with prayer and any other avenue that a woman chooses to connect to. Like, it's not just helping her feel good and actualize in her Judaism, but it's like she actually has a soul that is connecting to God in this moment of the mitzvah. And like, that's something that we can miss when we just focus on like, how are we going to make women feel like they're not trapped in their Judaism, but like actually fully expressed? So
I think that's actually the key insight, is that this isn't a problem. This is an opportunity. There's tremendous opportunities for spiritual growth for women in learning Torah and getting closer to Torah mitzvot.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to be afraid of that. I'll give you like a little thing that's jumping to mind. So one of the things we write about on the site, we talk about Torah reading. And sometimes for some people, something that can be hard about Torah reading is that women don't have aliyot, and women don't read from the Torah. And the MS, like the bottom line truth of what's going on in Torah reading. So if you learn about it inside, we're listening to the word of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not that only the person who's reading the Torah is the person who's active. The person getting the aliyah, so it's a very nice kavod, sure, to get an aliyah. That's great. But it's not that those are the only people being active during Torah reading. Actually, you're being there, listening, paying attention to the word, to Dvar Hashem. That's the major action in Torah reading. Like the reader, the Ola Torah, they're facilitating that.
I love that.
But the action is with you. The same thing with Tefillah B'tzibur, right? It's not all about the Shaliach Tzibur. Like Tefillah B'tzibur, when a woman can't help create a minyan. But when a woman is in a tzibur, in a congregation, with a minyan of 10 men, she's part of that tzibur. She's part of that tefillah. So it's, and just like the men who are davening, the fact that they help create a minyan, so like man number 11 is still part of that tzibur. They didn't need him to make the minyan. The woman is also part of that tzibur. And the activity is davening.
Right.
right? The activity is not leading the davening. Like, it's not, Shul isn't theater.
Yeah.
Right? Like you are doing the avoda if you're there. And that's also one of the things that's like sometimes hard for me about, like, Shul isn't for everybody. Mm-hmm. For sure. There's some women who daven by the way, a lot of men would love to daven more on their own, or to feel more comfortable davening on their own. You know, for a lot of women, look, a lot of women struggle, a lot of everybody struggles to daven, struggle to have time for daven. Some people daven much better on their own, some people daven in Shul. And at the same time, like, I feel that our communities could be more supportive of women davening in Shul sometimes. Depends on the community and the setup. And okay, so there might be some years where it's more feasible and some years where it's less feasible. But when it happens, it's very meaningful, because then the woman is part of the tzibur that's davening. She gets to hear tefillah b'tzibur. She gets to hear the kedusha. She gets to hear kriyat Torah. Like, those are really, she gets to see the Torah during Hagba. Like, those are meaningful halachic things to do. They're ways of serving a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So yes, there are other options, and it's great that there's that flexibility. I think we could be more positive about women for whom those are meaningful options, or who might explore it. That's something else I think, another point I'd like to make, which is just that we're not, like, I can't speak for you, I can only speak for myself, but I know that I change over time. And things that are meaningful to me at some times are different to me at other times. I remember after Corona, it took me a while to get back to going to Shul.
Oh, interesting.
Because I'd really transitioned out of it. And that was so interesting for me, because I've always been someone who really likes Shul. And it was like, for a while, it was like, I don't know if I want to go back. And actually, I think I wasn't alone back, because there are a lot of women who took a long time, and some women didn't come,
right.
So a lot of shifts. But I think that idea that also sometimes if we can make more room in our community for being supportive of, or more supportive of, women exploring different forms of avodas Hashem, again, within a halachic framework, of course, less suspicious and more excited and supportive, I think that's really valuable, because we change over time. And the thing if I don't need to know it necessarily now, like maybe right now, a specific type of avodat Hashem is not so essential to me, but you know what? It might become really important to me.
Right.
At another point in time. So it's not just like this woman versus that woman. We are many women. We go through so many phases in our lives, and I think it's important to have those opportunities to tap into, as we change.
Yeah,
I love
what and
grow.
Yeah, less suspicious and more excited is not only such a great way to look at others, but also within ourselves. I think that, I know for myself, I definitely at points had internalized that message of like suspicion around like any desire to grow or explore my Judaism in certain avenues that I was like naturally feeling drawn to, and just feeling like suspicious of my sincerity, like, because I had always really heard this message about like women exploring maybe in avenues that weren't culturally the norm, or I didn't have so many examples of, that it was like, is that about your ego? Is that about yourself? Is that about yourself? Like, why are you interested in that? And feeling like immediately suspicious and shutting it down, until it reached like a bubbling over point where I was like, oh my goodness, like there's so much that I'm shutting down in my Judaism that are really my channels of connection, but because I like don't see them as like being my natural channel. So that like suspicion versus excitement is also something to deal with within our own selves. Like, how do we navigate our own desires around our Judaism? Where do you feel like natural curiosities or desires to explore? And can you see them with excitement instead of just being like, oh no, I'm becoming that person, or, like I'm going down that route, or I'm going to have to navigate like some uncharted territory, which is harder. But to actually be excited and to say like, look at my soul, like calling out for connection and wanting to be connected. And we each have different avenues because we're unique and we have unique connections to God.
Yeah, so I think those are really good questions. Look, sometimes it's good to talk to other people, especially aseh l'charav, right?
Yeah.
It's always good to have a trusted figure to check in with about things. In terms of checking in with ourselves, I think something I think about a lot, actually, and I don't know if this will resonate, but something I think about a lot is like, is this l'shem shamayim, but not in the sense of I suspect myself, I'm getting down on myself. More in the sense of like, can I find the l'shem shamayim in this? Or even like, let's say talking to you, I don't go on podcasts all the time. No, really, you know, and just like this checking in of like, you know, well, and really it actually calms me down tremendously. It's like, okay, I want to do this l'shem shamayim. And like, if I can just kind of keep in contact with that as being what I'm trying to do, then I think I'm in a much better position. Because first of all, if I see that I'm running against some firm halacha or a very strong minhag in my community, so if I understand it's l'shem shamayim, then I'll also know, okay, I need to I have to find an avenue that's not going to chafe against that, but that's going to somehow I have to find an avenue within that. It still might not be exactly what I'm doing now.
Right.
It can be sometimes something very subtle, right? But like that's the other thing. Little things can make such a big difference. So it's like it doesn't. You're still in the driver's seat, right? Like when you're thinking about something or starting to explore or trying to grow spiritually, it's not like, oh no, I'm gonna be like hurtling down this mountain and like, you know, some kind of like sled I can't stop, like roller coaster that I can't. No, like, you know, you're still there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're still there. So like, okay, so check in.
Yeah.
Think small. But like the amazing thing about, I feel like the amazing thing about Torah and Ruchnias, spirituality, is that like, you know, these little small things can make such a big difference. And that's back to like learning. I feel like that it's such a resource for those little small things. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm having trouble davening, but I can't look into it because I feel like it's just going to open up for me some kind of worms that's going to like make everything miserable, you know, like. But like, I think it really can be like, okay, I'm having trouble davening, and you could start with your point of strength, right? You say, like, what is still working for me, or what has worked for me in the past, like, or what am I interested in the most? Like, is there specific, like, can I find one bracha?
Right.
Can I find one bracha that says something to me, or that I can like grab onto, or like wake up for? Like with Shemona Esrei, I feel like for so many people, Shemona Esrei is sort of like, it's hard to keep focus, and then like suddenly like the bracha for refuah shows up, and suddenly it's like, okay, pull focus, like I'm here, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm back, like
right.
But I don't think that's a bad thing to feel terrible about. I feel like the response is, let me find more of those. Let me find more of those elements of a mitzvah that are beautiful, that I can connect to. Yeah. Those are there other spots in Shemona Esrei that I can get myself to like wake up for. Right. Right? And that's like for me, like let's say Shabbos. And I'm someone, I don't always have an easy time focusing during davening. My mind tends to wander, like davka during davening, right? But we're in good company, like there are Moraim, there are Chazal, and like Yerushalmi. There's like stories of like the things they're imagining during tefillah and how hard it is to like have proper kavod. It's just hard. I mean, some people it comes naturally. I've never been blessed to be one of those people. And sometimes I do better than others.
Yeah, you're not alone.
But like on Shabbos davening, just like an example, like v'tar libeinu le'ovdecha be'emet, right? Purify our hearts to serve you truly. That's such an important phrase and idea. It really gets to the heart of love, what we're talking about here, right? Yeah. Like, and we're never going to be totally purified. First of all, it's not we're going to purify, right? This one is we're davening to Hashem that He should help us out. You v'taher libeinu le'ovdecha be'emet. I can't do this alone. I need you to help me so that I can serve you truly. But it's also like, for me, like a lot of times I'll save like a Shemona Esrei because it'll be like I'm trying, you know, and I get to that phrase, oh yeah, and I know like I'll stop and I'll think and I'll be in that moment, and so it's little things like that with mitzvot too, like back to Hanukkah, right? You're lighting Hanukkah candles. So if you learn about some of the traditions about, we say, Afhena Yubel Tornes, women were in the miracle, and that's why women are obligated to light Hanukkah candles, even though it's a positive time-bound mitzvah. Some of the traditions about what it means for women to be in the miracle, talk about how Antiochus wasn't, the decrees of the Seleucid Greeks weren't just about men's circumcision or about Shabbos, but or what they did to Beit HaMikdash. I shouldn't say just, because those are, I mean, gigantic. There was also a whole world of sexual violence.
Yeah.
But like to think about that, and to think about how responding to that, and according to some traditions, women taking the lead in responding to that, helped bring about the Chashmonaim making their move and fighting, and Hashem coming through with the Nes miracle so that we could prevail, and that's Hanukkah. Like those, it's a little thing, but it's not a little thing, because now I'm lighting the candle and it's different, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
No, you know, like little sparks that you can hold on to, that you can like latch onto or connect to, that you naturally feel drawn to as your way of connecting. That's what, like, as you said, like if you do feel drawn to certain additional things or things that you're, you know, desiring to be more connected to, like let yourself follow those trails.
Yeah, and, you know, like grow the light. Like don't get over, I feel like it's so easy to get down on yourself, and like I think it's always got to start with like finding what's there and building up.
Building on it. Beautiful. You're mentioning how you spend a lot of time studying halacha. We began by speaking about your work at Derech, where you create these resources for women to really encounter the sources around mitzvos or topics that are directly related to them. Wondering if we could zoom out for a second to talk about the significance of halacha, because many people, even those who are practicing halacha, don't necessarily feel this like personal deep connection to it. They might feel like, okay, I do what I got to do around halacha, but I get excited more about like the spiritual, emotional, experiential elements of my Judaism, and halacha is kind of just like part of that picture. But you have like such a personal, powerful connection to halacha. Tell us how you see the significance of halacha in relation to our Judaism and the way that we practice our Judaism.
Wow, that's such an amazing question. I think it's so hard for me that so often I feel like halacha is presented or it's understood as just being, do this, don't do that. Just, it's a rule book, right?
Yeah.
Set in stone. There's nothing else to talk about. There's nowhere, you know, the case closed.
Right.
It's like, you know, everything is a sentence with an exclamation point at the end of it. And
no commas.
Yeah. And okay, so if halacha were only that, that would still be valuable, right? Because we need the framework for avodat Hashem, of what it means to really serve God,
right?
And that we're not just making it up.
Yeah.
But one of the amazing things that happens when you get to learn halacha a little bit more in depth, especially from the sources, is you discover that it's so much richer than that. It's not just do's or don'ts. First of all, because we're Jewish, so everything starts with disagreements, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Right? But the disagreements don't end. Like, you can have a disagreement that runs through centuries. You can have an opinion that's rejected, but then, like, the later halachic decisors will find a way to kind of, like, be careful for it, too. But the thing about these opinions and the disagreements is they're there because positions on a given halacha very often represent an idea, a concept, right? On the most basic level, an idea of a concept of what does this halacha mean?
Right.
What is it about? What is it for?
Yeah.
But on a broader level, you know, like it can be like deep hashkafic ideas that animate these halachic questions, so that when you learn halacha, it's, I guess, you know what, it's actually really funny. I'm realizing now that it parallels very much what we were talking about. Okay, this is neat. I haven't really formulated it for myself this way before. Remember before where we were talking about kind of this idea of like you make Shabbos, right? So halacha is like your partner and guide in making all of these things. You don't necessarily even realize it, but it's that's and the same way that when you make it as an individual, there's this spirit, there are these ideas, there's this yearning for a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's behind it. It's there in the halacha. It's there in the halachic discussion also,
right?
And it's just a matter of having the opportunity to see it and to learn it. And then you can start to grow with it. And the other thing that I think is so incredibly important to halacha is the way in which halacha is responsive to life's nuances. This comes up in particular, it comes up with women's issues all the time, and it also comes up a lot with the work in the laws of Nida, laws of Taharat Mishpacha. Yeah. If a couple is going through fertility challenges, the correct halachic response for them in a specific situation might be different than if they're not. The same thing for Shalom Bayit challenges.
Right.
Meaning there's room inside the world of halacha for people. It's Torat Chaim. Right? Halacha is making the world that we enter into, this world of Avodat Hashem. Then it's when you learn it, not just as strict, do this, don't do that, where you start to really connect and understand, oh, this is the way it's actually guiding me to be a certain kind of person, or this is the moment where I'm actually understanding there's an idea. Like what I was saying before in Kiddush, right? It's Kiddush isn't just a question of what am I allowed to make Kiddush on, how big is the cup, who can say it. It's a question of what Kiddush is about. It all starts there. How is Kiddush linked to the Shabbos meal? What does that mean? And then the questions of like the specifics oftentimes filter out from that question of what is it really about?
Right.
What and sometimes it's not just one thing. What are the things that are really going on here? And it's also, it's fascinating when you start to get into that, because these things that you take for granted. I was recently teaching about Hanukkah in the SEM about lighting candles, and we were learning about making use or not making use of Hanukkah lights. So I said it that way, but that sounds shocking, right? Because don't we say Hanerot Halalu? These candles, they're holy. We can't use them. Right. Yeah, that's how we paskin. But we didn't start out that way. There's a whole halachic discussion about it. And when you start understanding the halachic discussion, it's so rich because suddenly you realize, wait, this candle is not like any other candle.
Right.
Like we are creating light not to use it. Like, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you really think about what that halacha means, we are creating light not to use it. And then there are different opinions about what that means. Is it just that, like, because we want to show it value, because it's a mitzvah, and we need to give this mitzvah, as it were, its own space, honor it, right? Like, if you were gonna like count your money, or I don't know, do your nails, like by the light of the Hanukkah candle, like.
Right.
What have you done to that? Like, are you respecting that light, kind of thing? But then there's this perspective that they're holy, right? Like the Nerot in the Mikdash were holy, and that just opens up this whole other idea. And you suddenly realize that, like, wait, I'm not using these candles. I'm not allowed to use these candles. I have the shamash that's there to keep me covered. Okay, but then it's sort of like, so let me look at them again. Looking at this light, like taking in this light and not using this light, like that's so powerful. What is that? Like it speaks to all kinds of ideas about just, I don't know, the miracle of existence, much less the miracle of Jewish survival. I mean, there's so much there, and it's triggered by a halachic discussion with different perspectives. Like that gives it its depth and its meaning, and that opens up that discussion.
Right, and if you only meet the halacha at the end point, then it will just feel like a do or don't. But if you're able to like follow that whole trail, then you can really like see the soul of the mitzvah, and that gives you a completely different relationship to the halacha that you're practicing.
Yeah, it's it's the equivalent of what we were talking about in tefillah, where, you know, there's that line that you learned well, and then, you know, it grabs you. The more you learn halachot, the more you experience performing halachot is like, oh yeah, that's what this is. Right, that's what this is. This is what I'm doing now, and this is what it means.
Right.
So we have an intuitive sense of that, and we don't want to lose the intuitive sense of that, because that really matters, and that's not just coming from us, that's coming from everything we've soaked in our lives.
Right.
But then there's also there's more. There are worlds and worlds of more.
Yeah.
And they're not just in Hasidus. Mm-hmm. You know, they're there in Halacha also. And also just sometimes they're just things that are just like delightful. Like back to like we were talking about shofar, and it's like, you know, seeing medieval halakhic authorities talking about, well, wait with shofar till women can come.
Right.
Like, you know, and you're just like, oh,
that's sweet.
Till women can come. Like, that was something you were thinking about. Like that was something. Like, again, it's just sort of it's finding points of meaning and finding points for yourself. And then the other thing that's really important about really learning halacha inside, and not just as do's and don'ts. Back to another theme of this conversation. I feel like I'm so repetitive, but I'm just on theme, on point.
No, you totally are not repetitive.
Is that, oh, well, sometimes there are different halachic opinions. Like sometimes it's not just like this way or it's usser.
Right. Sometimes
there actually really are different valid halachic approaches to doing things. And we know this already, because we know there are things that, like, I don't know, our yucky friends are washing hands before Kiddush or whatever it is. And we know that that's valid and legit according to that opinion. But when you start to understand that there's often more halachic discussion and halachic room for, it can be subtle differences, but for differences, and they can be real, I think that's really important too. Sometimes it might be because you might need that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it might be that that's going to be the difference between you being able to find yourself in the world of halacha and not. But sometimes it's even just to be able to respect or to understand or appreciate what you're doing.
Right. And how other people practice as well.
Yeah. So it's so rich. It gives you so much more appreciation for all of these things that are so basic and integral to Jewish lives. So I think there's so much there, and I think the reason that people shy away from it is really this sense of, well, it might be dangerous, or it's just too absolute. You know, I don't want to know any more about the things I'm doing wrong. Right. I can't handle it. Don't tell me another thing I have to keep in mind. And that, by the way, also gets back to like the whole thing of lived tradition, because the truth of the matter is the things that you see lived aren't so scary,
right?
As when you just like, you know, like, I don't know, you could have this thing where I've had Balat Tshuva as students who've been like scared to like, how do I make salad on Shabbos? I don't know how I do this anymore, and I totally get that, because sometimes you read Sfarim and then like, but like if you just go into a kitchen with someone and you see, and then you realize like, oh, and the Sefer did leave room for that. I just like putting two and two together, like I can't turn a light on Shabbos, but we all know that we set up the lights in advance.
Right.
You know?
So like, am I going to walk around in the dark all Shabbos?
Right.
Yeah, it can feel much more intimidating within the book than it is in person.
Right, but like once you know it, if you have someone to like put it into practice for you to understand, like, how are you actually taking care, like how is this actually being responded to?
Yeah.
You're in a different space.
I love how you say that halacha is not black and white, and that there is that whole process, because I think most people, when they say that, like, nothing in Judaism is black and white besides for halacha. And then if you actually become informed about halacha, you see that process that you're describing, and that's something that you do in the articles that you write, is that you don't come to the conclusion at the end. You bring all of the halachic sources on a topic in order to allow a person to really feel what you're describing, which is that there is space within halacha for different perspectives, for different people's experiences, for different people's paths. And we do see so many different communities within Judaism, and we each practice differently with slight, you know, like variations, and all of them are valid. And that is such a beautiful thing to like really behold within halacha. And I also love what you said about like halacha creating this world for us to step into and be a part of. And when you see halacha as that framework that creates like a world, like God's world that we get to live in versus this like rule book,
right, it
changes the experience of like all the details of Shabbos are like creating this framework of resting with Hashem. It's a different.
Right. And it's also, it's like, it's interesting, meaning like it's engaging in that way.
Right.
When you experience Shabbos, when you understand why there are things you're doing and you're not doing, it's just, you're in a different place. You are. So of course there are black and whites, right? It's not that there's no black and whites, but it's just that like, I think people blow up what's black and what's white, like beyond a certain point, and it's sort of, and it's just missing so much of the beauty.
Yeah.
Like, I guess also because I feel like I love the fact that we have different communities with like these beautiful different traditions.
Like, yeah.
Like, don't you love going to someone else's home for Shabbos and like discovering?
Yeah, different way of doing it, and it's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think I just think Torah is so vast. It's so vast, and like to cut off all the beauty and the shivim panim that can often be like that are in halacha too. It's just missing something.
Yeah. And it gives us that opportunity to like really experience it when we study. Something in your mission statement is that you specifically want people to be able to access these resources from a woman's perspective, like women gathering these resources and putting them together. What do you think is unique about hearing this or learning this specifically from a woman?
Okay. So I want to step back one moment because I feel like I didn't fully answer your last question.
Okay.
And then I'm going to come back to this. Back to what we said before, another reason why we didn't bring up Pesach. First of all, of course, I'm not a posek. I'm working, everything that goes up, Rabbanim are reviewing everything.
Okay.
But the idea is that there's an educational project before you get to the halacha l'maisa. And I think that sometimes people collapse. They think that like all halacha is immediately the bottom line, halacha l'maaseh.
Right.
And the idea of not ending with, you just have to do this. Look, sometimes it's crystal clear and there's nothing else to talk about.
Right.
But when there are different perspectives, it's like, that's like part of that education. Okay. Coming back to the question you just asked.
Thanks for adding that.
When halacha sfarim are formulated, it's still mostly the case today, but it's even going back to traditional sfarim, the assumption was that women were not going to be reading them,
right,
or at least not going to be the main readers. Not out of any ill will, but that was how education worked. Women were learning more from imitation, and not from text.
Right.
Even though everyone agrees that women need to learn halacha, like that's
right.
Because women need to know what to do.
Right.
So the question is just a question of how.
Right.
But women were learning it not from text and through imitation. So the texts were written not necessarily from a woman's perspective. So I'll give an example. Let's say you're talking about kisui rosh, head covering. So a text or discussions about head covering would often focus on not just how a woman has to cover her head, but a big issue would be, what is a man allowed to see? And that might even be the first or primary point of entry to the topic of discussion. Or a sefer on tefillah might talk about what a woman needs to say in like a footnote. Like, what does a woman need to say if she's short on time, which is such a common question.
Yeah.
And like a footnote in like a couple 100-page book. But like, that's a footnote, even though it's like it's a central concern for women. But if women are not the main people reading the book, so it's not like the main thing that the book is about. And that none of that is wrong, right? None of that is wrong. If women are learning in a different way or from a different place, then that makes sense. But like, that really does change things. So for example, for a woman to learn about kisui rosh, I actually think it's really important not to start with what a man is allowed to see or not allowed to see, but actually to start with a woman's obligation to cover her head,
right,
which is which is the beginning from a woman's perspective, and then the question of what a man can or can't see is another element to it, but it's not the first driving force behind it. Or when it comes to tefillah, like what a woman needs to say is, of course, going to be a central matter of concern. So that kind of thing. Or also there's certain questions that women are naturally going to have that aren't necessarily always going to be as central for men when you're talking about a given issue that you want to bring up. Just questions about how to balance even things like Lela Seder, how to balance caring for family or helping to set up the Seder with what you need to say in Lela Seder, and to know what it is. Of course, that's going to show up in all this Sfarim, but it might be a little more central in a discussion that's geared for women, because it's going to be more frequently something that arises. So just sort of like having that question, or even knowing that. And by the way, I think this is just good halacha learning in general. I don't think it's just good for women, because something that happens a lot also is in halachic discussions about the nature of a woman's obligation in a given mitzvah, her relationship to a given mitzvah. A lot of times those discussions really are going to hinge on how is a given posek understanding the essential nature of that mitzvah. Like the core questions of the mitzvah's identity often get raised in trying to understand if a woman's obligated in the mitzvah. Let's say, for example, the example that's jumping to mind is Havdalah. With Havdalah, it's a question about, well, are women obligated in Havdalah? If women are obligated in Havdalah, and we say we are, to what, on what level is the obligation, and does it include the bracha over the candle? And those questions really get into fundamental definitional questions about Havdalah. Is Havdalah really a pair with Kiddush? It's up there on a Torah level, starting just like Kiddush, an element of remembering Shabbos. To remember Shabbos, you have to remember it when it comes in, and you have to understand what it was when it goes out, and that's Rambam. Or is Havdalah really something that belongs more to Motzei Shabbos? Right? And in which case it's different, and it's not necessarily in the category of Shabbos mitzvahs where women and men are, for most mitzvahs of Shabbos, women and men have the same situation, because women are in prohibitions, we're subject to prohibitions, and we say with Shabbos that Zachor and Shabor, B'dibur Chad, the prohibitions and positive commandments come together. So it's sort of like what I'm trying to say is those questions about a woman and her relationship to Havdalah, to answer them properly, you have to understand something fundamental about Havdalah. And in fact, someone even who wasn't interested from a woman's perspective, who wanted to learn about Havdalah, that would be a good discussion to look at, to see what it's about. And then sort of like thinking from the beginning of presenting it, like how to do it. Something else we do on the site, which is sort of interesting, is we refer to women as we. We, or not necessarily we no, let me put that more accurately. We don't refer to women as they. I'll tell you a story and how what happened. So halachic sources, generally speaking, refer to women as they. And that's because it's Rabbanim writing, generally speaking, for other Rabbanim to guide women. Of course, they know women. They're in discussion with women. They care about women. But the Sfarim were Rabbanim writing for other Talmidei Chachamim. I was once teaching a class. Like I said, I taught these topics many, many years. And I realized that I was always talking about women, like also in the class. I'm a woman. I'm teaching a group of women, and because the sources keep talking about women as they, I'd find myself like dropping into they language. Interesting. And it was so interesting. I was like, but wait a minute, we're not they, we're we. So a lot of what it is even just that sense of like being aware throughout the discussion that women are at least part of the we. You know, we're not like some like special needs, unique subset situation. Like, you know, we're more than 50% of the population. Like, we're part of the we. Like, we're in it. we're part of Am Yisrael.
It welcomes you in.
Yeah, and I used to think that if I were giving a shiur and I was going to focus on women's issues in halacha, that I should I had to make that clear from the start. So people knew in advance that was what was going on. And then I realized, wait, again, we're more than 50% of the population.
Yeah.
It should be a given that I can talk about this and I don't have to automatically say that this is about women and,
Right.
This is part of the core discussion. So it's sort of like that as an animating perspective.
I really love that. I love that messaging. And even as you said, the entry point into the discussion being from the perspective of what the woman is obligated in as opposed to what the man can't see. That is a core distinction that allows a woman to really feel oh, this is my space where I'm entering to explore my mitzvah of hair covering, which is between me and God ultimately, and primarily, not just ultimately at the end of the day, but that's what it's about. So question I have for you is if you have ever struggled with your womanhood within Judaism, if it has ever posed some type of struggle for you.
And the answer is, of course. Because sometimes I don't understand things, and that can be hard.
Yeah,
and I think there was a time. The thing that I remember is there was one Simchas Torah in particular. I was much younger, and I wanted to be closer to the Torah. That's how I felt. I wanted to be physically closer to the Torah. And it just felt like the most natural thing in the world to want to be physically closer to the Torah. And I loved the Shul, and I loved the davening, and it was so complicated for me internally. Or there are moments where, there are years where I didn't go to Shul at all, and I loved going to Shul.
Right.
And I was with my kids, and there were years where we worked it out, and my husband went to an earlier davening, but there were years where that couldn't work out, and that could be really hard.
Yeah.
But, and this is the big but, I feel like that's part of a relationship, meaning it's not supposed to be that everything seems perfect or everything is perfect, or I never have a question, or I never have a doubt, or I never have a worry. I don't think that that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is expecting from us. That doesn't seem human to me, right? What I do think is that when something comes up and it's challenging, it's really important for us to learn more in a thoughtful and respectful way, and to try to be sensitive about how we do it, not to jump to conclusions. And I also think, and this is something I've learned over time as well, you can't struggle about everything all the time, and you can't necessarily solve things before you move on. A lot of times what it is you get to a certain level of understanding. I call it a plateau.
Yeah.
With certain things, you get to a certain plateau and you say, okay, that's where this is going to be for now.
Okay.
And maybe some more information or growth or life experience or Torah is going to go in that hopper at some point, and that'll move.
Right.
But that's there for now.
Right.
And I'll think about what I'm thinking about now. I think it's a healthy, to my mind, part of being a healthy spiritual human being is also sometimes having questions and not feeling like you have to run away from them or hide them or be ashamed about them. Feelings aren't wrong. You're allowed to have feelings. But then the question is, what do you do about those feelings? You interrogate them intentionally with your thoughts and with your learning, and you say, where are they coming from? What is it about? Is there stuff I don't know?
Well, in that example of Simchas Torah, has that resolved for you, or in what way?
So it's changed a lot. Let's say in my shul now, when we first came, Simchas Torah for women, there wasn't really anything happening. And now let's say it's a given every year that we have a shiur while we're a shul where all the men get aliyot, which can take a while.
Yeah.
And now it's a given that we have a women's shiur during that time. And you know what? That's wonderful. And there are women who don't go. There are women who love listening to all the men getting all the aliyot. Right. And I think that's wonderful. Meaning I love that there's space for that. And I love that there's a group of women getting together to learn Torah and feel close to Torah together, at that moment.
Beautiful.
And Does that mean that everything about Simchas Torah has suddenly become perfect? Not necessarily, but it's helped so much with my spiritual connection to Simchas Torah. Right now, Simchas Torah is sensitive because of the recent events, which is a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's not always about things changing outside you also. It can be things changing inside you. But I guess I don't think we have to be afraid of our feelings. I don't think we have to be afraid to ask questions. I think Torah is strong enough, beautiful enough, deep enough that it will hold up. You know, and we have to have some humility in Yirat Shamayim to say, well, the fact that I'm having feelings doesn't mean that I'm right. Doesn't mean that I know everything, and I shouldn't be judging Torah. Right? Sometimes the Torah should be calling me into question, more than vice versa. But we don't have to be afraid of ourselves.
Yeah.
We can look at that, and I think that's one of the ways that we can grow spiritually is by seeking out resources to address those feelings.
Right.
I think that sometimes you get apathy or you get cut off, and it's very hard to grow spiritually if you're not willing to look at what's hard for you ever.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm all for growth. So I don't think we have to be afraid of ourselves. I think we can look at those signals as a key that it's time to find a way to grow.
Yeah. I really love that. And I want to close our conversation by asking you like a few rapid fire questions, which are going to be like, so much fun.
Okay.
But these are like quick. So like 2 sentences on them. And they're going to be like, you're like, I don't know if you got this. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to be like, I want to answer more. Well, maybe not. Maybe I feel like it's like fun because then you get to like distill them into like little points. Okay. So
I'm rolling with you.
What?
I'm
You're rolling with me. Okay, awesome. So my first question to you is what has Torah study given you in your Judaism? But like as a rapid fire question.
I mean, it's made me who I am. I'm a different person.
Wow. That's huge. Okay, who are 3 Jewish role models that you have?
Oh, wow. 3 Jewish role models. I mean, I have so many role models, actually. Well, I want to talk about one of my Rabbanim. It was Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin. It was a tremendous, I had the zchus to learn with him and work with him for many, many, many years.
Wow.
On questions about Hilchot Nida, and just, he was a very big role model for me. Another one I mentioned earlier, my grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandma. I think about her all the time.
I love that.
She's such a role model for me. I want to choose, who do I want to choose as my third? I'm not good at rapid.
What are you doing to me?
I'm doing okay with brief, but I don't do so well with rapid. What I really say is my third. There's a woman, the wife of the Drisha, or Rebbetzin Bela Falk, who was this hundreds of years ago. She was a Rebbetzin, and her son writes about her. This is too long. But anyway, basically,
You're good.
She is this integration. She was hundreds of years ago this integration of being really learned and giving tzedakah and chesed and making food for her family and
Where can we learn more about her?
We actually talk about it a little bit in the introduction to Duracha.
Okay, cool.
We mentioned her. There's like a segment about that. Yeah, and she's wow.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so for the last one, I'm going to let you like cheat on the rapid fire. Like I won't be too strict with this one. Okay. Yeah.
I already cheated. So.
Yeah, you're good. You see, we're not too strict with the rules. Okay. But my question to you is, if you could imagine just like this dream world of what it means to be a Jewish woman, how do you imagine what Jewish womanhood is and how it's like taught to your, either to your daughter or your student, like how you would pass on what it means to be a Jewish woman in this beautiful ideal state?
The truth of the matter is I feel like I'm often in that state in a certain way because like when I love, like this also, when women have like real conversations, and if it's over learning, it's even better, but like authentic, Toradic conversations, and you feel like it just spreads over everything. You feel so connected, and that you can have different perspectives. Again, but that sense of like, yeah, we're in this process together.
Yeah.
That's an ideal. I'm not a big person on endpoints. I think it's really exciting to be part of a process.
Oh, I love that.
You know, we're part of Jewish history. We're part of Torah. And that's like, you know, we are part of our people. We are this generation's, this generation's Jewish women. And like those moments where I feel like we're taking responsibility for it by authentically putting ourselves there. I don't even think I mean process. I mean Masorah, really, in a certain way, you know. I think that's really the word. It's like, you know, we're in some, we are, it's been handed to us. And those moments where I feel like women come together and hold that, you know, hold that in truth. Like, that's an ideal. Like, that's an ideal. That. However it expresses itself.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. I think that there is like something so feminine about that to me, about that ability to like have that authentic conversation centered around Torah in the way that you're describing. And it can take so many different forms, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not about, oh, we need women to be doing this, or we need women to be doing that, or you're not measuring up here. That's not what it is at all. It's just, you know, our neshamas coming out to each other and helping embrace each other, you know, and striving to, you know, to do our Avodat Hashem together. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you. What an honor to connect with you, truly. Like, I feel so blessed to have had this opportunity to connect with you and to like feel your spirit. Like, there was a part of me that just feels like so whole, having the opportunity to speak with you, hear from your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you. Like, you thought so carefully about everything that you brought up, and you asked really meaningful, good questions that got me thinking in ways I hadn't thought before.
I'm so happy.
And I'm deeply appreciative of that. And, you know, I'm not so wise. I'm learning all the time.
You are.
But we're learning all the time.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, like, we just need to help each other.
Yeah.
Keep growing.
I love how you said that. And that's like such a beautiful way to end. Like, when we share freely of our own neshamas, we awaken that within others, and we're able to like help each other on this path. We're all in it together, all in different ways, and we learn so much when we're able to like really get that wisdom from each other. So thank you. Seriously, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved it. And if you did, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating or review. It helps other people find the podcast and, you know, brings us joy. Get in touch with us if you have any questions, comments, follow-up thoughts on today's episode, info@humanandholy.com. And if you appreciate the work that we're doing and want to support what we do, email us or visit our website, humanandholy.com/sponsor, to sponsor an episode, dedicate an episode, or just support the work that we do because you love it and you want to see more of it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.